And there are quite a few Joycean connections here in the village of Chapelizod. And that man up on the bridge, Frank Harte, is going to tell me a little bit more about it. Frank, what about Joyce and Chapelizod?
Well, Joyce he was no stranger to Chapelizod. He knew Chapelizod well. And the bridge here, for example, was renamed just in memory of, or in honour of, James and his Anna Livia Bridge. But there were many other areas in Chapelizod that Joyce was very familiar with.
Can we have a look at them?
Yeah, come on.
So where are we off to next?
Well, just across beyond, in front of you there, the Mullingar House.
Up the top there.
Tell
us about Mullingar House.
It's very old. I'd say it's somewhere in the region of 250. Well, it's mentioned in the history books way back as 250 years ago or 300 years ago, when Chapelizod was generally considered a place of entertainment for the military, I'd say. Of course, it was also the setting for what is probably one of the most controversial works in the world of Joyce's Finnegan's Wake, where Humphrey Chimpden Earwicker lived here, you know, and dreamed up the sequence, and Joyce wrote it out.
So Earwicker was the publican here?
He was the publican. He lived just here.
Well, your dad was a publican as well. You were born and raised here in Chapelizod, weren't you?
Down here in the village, in the square itself. My father had a pub just below.
Frank, when you were a kid, were all these houses occupied?
Yeah. First house here now, you had the O'Hara's lived there, a large family of them. She was a seamstress, Miss O'Hara. Around the corner you had McAveni's living in that. Down below you had Riley's. And this building here with the steps going up to it had numerous families living up there. It was known as Gamble's Buildings.
Was it a very tight little village? Was it a very strong community?
Well, it still is, and it was then. Everybody knows everybody, and everybody is interrelated in the village.
And where did all those people disappear to?
Oh, Ballyfermot, Palmerstown, Lucan, God knows where they are.
Now, up this little cut here is the Phoenix Park.
Yeah.
How vital a part has the Phoenix Park played in the life of Chapelizod?
Well, I mean, we all grew up in the Phoenix Park. In those days, you could go up any time, run around the park, play football, play chasing, wheeler, hoop. You can see the little style is still there going up to it. And my father actually had a pub there at the end of it. Well, I mean, the layout of the village itself is very strange. You had this area, which was known as the bank, the lower area in the New Row, and in between that, you had a common area. So that when people wanted to get from here down below, they simply went through that house there. There was no door, and this place was known as Everybody's Hall.
Well, can we go down around there? We can.
Yeah, we'll go down and have a look at the New Row.
Now, this butcher doesn't look like it was always a butcher. What was this?
That was the old schoolhouse. Not in my time, Shay, but it was the old schoolhouse.
Now, Frank, we've come round the back of Everybody's Hall. This used to be a little common here, was it?
That was common to these houses here. And coming through, you're coming now into...
And where are we coming out into now? You go outside of me there.
Into New Row.
And what was New Row?
Well, New Row was part of the workers' houses for the main factory, which would have been over there at the time. And an interesting feature of this little area is that you, just at the end here, you have a kirk, and still known as the kirk, but it was built at the time for the workers of the area. And
these were Scottish people, obviously, if it was called a kirk.
They would have been.
Yeah.
That was going to be part of the distillery also.
And was this a very lively little terrace?
Yeah, well, I mean, you have all the families in this area here, and you have all the people, you had a lot of children living here. How are you?
Well, now, Frank, we're back up in the square, and that's the pub where you were kind of born and raised, is it?
That's where the father had the pub. Well, not only my father had the pub, but my grandfather had the pub there as well.
Now, that building, that's quite famous.
Well, that's the remains of what was the industrial centre of Chapelizod. You had the linen mills, you had the flax mills.
How far back was that? I mean, that's a good while ago.
That would be 1650, around that time, when they set up the linen industry to start with.
And will they import the workers for that?
Well, you had workers came from Holland at that time with the linen industry. Later on, workers were imported from Scotland to set up the distillery, which it eventually ended up at. And it ended up as a warehouse until it went on fire about 6 or 7 years ago.
Well, Frank, Joyce was not the only literary figure to be associated with Chapelizod, sure not?
No, well, just across from what was the distillery there, you have the house by the churchyard, the novel written by John Sheridan Le Fanu. It was quite a celebrated novel in its time, a kind of a mystery, ghosty thing, where the villain was Martin. And peculiarly enough, the road down along here is Martin's Road.
Was Le Fanu from Chapelizod?
No, he wasn't, but his father was the chaplain in the military schools up in the Phoenix Park. But Nathaniel knew the place well, because in his descriptions of it and the house, you know that he was here.
Now, round behind Nathaniel's house, the house in the churchyard, the church is quite interesting itself.
It is a nice little church, the Protestant church. And one of the instinct features, I suppose, would be the tower itself. It has a square tower in the front here. But at the back, if you look around the back, you can see the remains of what appears to be a round tower. And it's known as Izolda's Tower, or La Belle Izolde, came from the area herself here. And it's from Izolda that the village got its name.